On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks improved to 3-1 with a close-fought win over the Detroit Pistons on the road in the first road game of the season for Atlanta. It wasn't always pretty. We'll get into all of what transpired, but the Hawks were the better team down the stretch, and they eventually emerged victorious with their much-needed third win of the season. We'll have full coverage and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1336 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday, October the 26th, in the aftermath of the Hawks going up to Detroit and picking up their first road win of the season, a final score of 118-113. And today's podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered the season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And I should also tell you at the top of the podcast that we are definitely encouraging you to make us your first listen each and every day. And check us out across podcast platforms by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and also on the video side over on YouTube. And yeah, today's show, we'll break down the game and all of what transpired for the Hawks. It was not always pretty. It was not an A-plus performance from Atlanta, but sometimes in the NBA you have to win when you're not playing your absolute best. And the Hawks went out on the road and did that in this game, the first of two in Detroit. They will have a rematch on Friday in the same venue against the same opponent. But yeah, certainly not a perfect game, but we'll have all of what transpired. And again, it's a win. And that's kind of all the Hawks wanted to get to on the road, especially on the road. Nothing is assured in the NBA. And the Hawks certainly made that point in earnest this evening, but they still emerged victorious, which was nice to see. As far as the pregame context of this one, the Hawks were favored, as you might expect, on the road. And listen, there were some nice performances. I thought defensively, both John Collins and Capela were excellent in this game. Trae Young had his season high, which we'll come back to. They had some nice balance offensively at times. And generally, the highs were pretty high for Atlanta in this game. The lows were pretty low as well. Some sketchy offense. First half defense was definitely a problem, but overall, certainly a performance that they'll be able to live with. And Nate McMillan seemed pretty okay with how they performed. Used the word solid several times in his post-game address, and that's kind of where we are at this point. But again, coming in, they're facing a Pistons team on a back-to-back, on the second night of a back-to-back, actually. So the Pistons got in from Washington, D.C., where they played the Wizards on Tuesday at like 4 a.m. That's a pretty big advantage. Yes, the Hawks were on the road, but they had not played since early on Sunday, actually, at 5 o'clock start against the Hornets on Sunday. They had some motivation after the loss on Sunday as well, and the Pistons were potentially should be dragging with their late arrival to Detroit, but for a large swath of this game, Pistons had a lot of energy, which was not necessarily shocking for a young team, but still notable. And by the way, the Pistons came in at 1-3, but also had the worst net rating in the league coming into the night. They had like a minus 12, almost 12.5 net rating. That's pretty ugly stuff. They have a lot of talent on this roster. Had one like Kate Cunningham and Jalen Duran, etc. But Jaden Ivey missed this game. He was ruled out before tip-off with an illness. They also are still without Marvin Bagley and Alec Burks, two of their rotational veterans. The Pistons are not loaded necessarily, which is always worth keeping in mind as far as context is concerned. On the Hawks side, Bogdanovich remains out for Atlanta. No surprise there. He did make the road trip. There were photos of him making the rounds before the Hawks actually even appeared today. He was on the bench and was around. Lauren Williams of the AJC reported from Detroit that he was doing some conditioning stuff during the open portion of the shoot-around on Wednesday. Nate, though, did say on Tuesday before they left town that he's not doing anything live still, so he's not terribly close, but it is encouraging that he would be on the road trip. Not that he's necessarily going to play on the road trip. I would keep that in mind, too. So in fact, if I had to guess, I'd probably say he won't play. But the fact that he's at least well enough to make those travel considerations and be around the team is probably a positive indicator on some level. And then briefly earlier in the day, into Tuesday and then into Wednesday, Justin Holiday was listed as questionable for Atlanta with a non-COVID illness. He ended up playing. He was upgraded to available to play midday on Wednesday. I know there's people that, at least Hawks fans, were like kind of rooting almost for Justin not to play. I would encourage people not to like root for guys to miss games necessarily. I think that I understand wanting to see AJ Griffin play. No question about that. And in fact, after this game was over, Nate McMillan got asked about AJ by Lauren Williams and kind of gave a pretty standard like matchup based answer talking about it. That's maybe why he wasn't playing. Said he was an option moving forward, but for the most part, I'm not going to do the AJ Griffin thing every single night. I made a lot of points about that in the last 2 days on the podcast, both in my solo show after the game on Sunday and also with Tower Jones on the podcast that dropped Monday evening into Tuesday. I would have at least tried AJ Griffin at some point, but I'm also not going to like rooting against guys playing. I think, generally speaking, Justin Holiday being available is a good thing for the Hawks. He's not a spectacular player, but I think that keep that all in mind and don't be outwardly rooting for players to miss games. I understand wanting to see Griffin though, because I think we all do at this stage. Anyway, the Hawks were 7.5-point favorites in this game on the road, according to our friends at BetOnline. They did not cover that number. In fact, they were not necessarily covering for large swaths of this game. Ended up not doing that at the end, but they got the win, and we'll dive into what transpired right now. So early in the game, the Hawks were flying high on offense. In fact, they were unstoppable in the early going. They went right at Bogdanovic for the Pistons. By the way, yes, they have a Bogdanovic as well, Bojan Bogdanovic. He actually has lost more than a step defensively since his prime, and that was one of the reasons why I was skeptical. People kind of asked if the Hawks would be interested in him when he was still in Utah. That was one of the reasons I might have thought not, because defensively he was really shaky in this game, but offensively he was on fire for Detroit in this one. Regardless, the Hawks scored on their first 9 possessions of this game. They made their first 5 shots. All really good looks. They got to the line 3 times, made all 3. They finally missed a couple shots on the 7th possession of the game, but got 3 offensive rebounds on that possession. It was just free offense in the early going. A free-point antithetical foul when Bogdanovic was called for one. Trae was in total command early on, getting to his spots without really much resistance at all from the Pistons. Capela had a couple of huge screens. Collins was active. Hunter was active, going right at Bogdanovic one-on-one. It was definitely a very encouraging offensive start for Atlanta. And the Hawks led this game by double digits multiple times in the first quarter before things kind of slowed down from there. They, in fact, did not have an empty possession without a point for 6 minutes to start the game. Kind of crazy. And even after that, they had back-to-back threes. Hunter did. After that actually came to an end. So pretty encouraging stuff at the outset. Rotationally, no surprises, basically, the entire game. We'll get into more nuance in the second half. We talked about Capela and the Kongwu, how those guys sort of staggered in the second half, but it was Justin Holiday and Kongwu first, and then it was Aaron Holiday and Jalen Johnson. It was a typical 9-man group. That's what Nate McMillan's been sharing the last couple of days. That's his core 9 right now with Bogey out. And the one thing that they sort of did change in the first half, and then change again in the second half, was that in the last few games, they've been going to Okongwu earlier in the first quarter and then having him play a short stint and then having Capela come back in with Trae. In the first half, they didn't do that. In the second half, they did that, kind of paired that against Jalen Duren. But so that's maybe they're one point of flexibility rotationally right now. It's kind of whether they do that actually or not at this stage. But I thought it was basically pretty normal stuff rotationally. The first big run, though, for the Pistons came late in the first quarter, a 15-4 run to cut the lead from the Hawks down to 1. Most of that came when the bench started to come in, and the bench really struggled in the first quarter. I know Nate was pretty praising of them in the second half. That's notable. I think they were better in the second half, but the first half it was pretty rough when stars left the floor, especially the first time through. Trae did cool off as well. He actually airballed a jump shot, missed another one, missed a layup in transition that he almost never misses. Couple of weird whistles in this game. I'll say this now in an effort to not say it again later. This is a pretty poorly officiated game, I thought. Ben Taylor's crew, not my favorite necessarily, calling this game. I think Hawks fans were rightly upset about a few calls. It wasn't only the Hawks. I think the Pistons got a few that were not great for them as well. It was a poorly officiated game. That's frustrating to watch, certainly, but I at least want to say that out loud because I don't do a lot of ref talk, generally speaking, on the podcast, but it was pretty rough, I thought, in this one. Anyway, the Hawks were up by 4 at the end of the first quarter. They had a 146 offensive rating in the first quarter of this basketball game. That speaks for itself. They had a 57% from the floor in the first quarter. They were 8 away from the free throw line with no turnovers. Trae had 16 points. He was flying high. Hunter had 4 for 4 for 10 points in the first quarter. He cooled off from there, but it was a good start for him. Defensively, though, it was pretty rough. A 133 defensive rating against a pretty bad Pistons offense. Detroit shot the ball well the entire game from 3, but they were not turning the ball over early either, and that was not necessarily the best indication of what was to come. Second quarter was not the best from Atlanta, let's just say. In fact, the Hawks lost both middle quarters in this one, not necessarily in huge fashion, but the Murray plus bench unit started the second quarter. That unit's been pretty bad by the numbers all season long so far. Obviously, it's only 4 games, but it was continuing in this spot. There was the same spacing and secondary creation issues that we talked about a lot on the podcast with Tower Jones on Tuesday. If you missed that one, I recommend listening to that one. Tower's always a fun conversation with me on the podcast. I know a lot of people love when he comes on the show, but that was a good conversation, I thought, about a lot of different things on the podcast. But Murray did have one beautiful pull-up mid-ranger off the glass over the top of Jalen Duren. That was nice to see. And it was kind of funny because it was kind of a slog. Detroit's second unit has kind of a similar challenge to the Hawks' second unit, and they don't have a lot of spacing, a lot of shooting on that second unit. At least the Hawks have Murray. The Pistons do not have anyone like Murray to engineer their offense when Cade leaves the floor. But the Hawks were still -2 in the non-Trae minutes in the first half anyway. Okongwu played a long time. As I mentioned before, he and Capela did not stagger the way they usually have been, and he put about 11 and a half minutes straight. I don't know if he got tired. I thought he had some issues with Jalen Duren in the first half. It got better as the stint went on. He also did make another one of those jump shots from about 14 feet on the right elbow, which is nice to see. But he was not necessarily great in this one. I didn't think he did improve as the game went along. There was a beautiful Trae Young, John Collins lob in which Collins had to almost double pump to catch it and finish it, hang in the air and make a big play there. But Detroit had their first lead momentarily after that with a 10-4 run. Cade Cunningham was giving the Hawks a lot of problems in the first half of this game, getting to his right hand comfortably, using his size advantage, kind of just bullying DeAndre Hunter in some respects, which is not what you want because Hunter is probably bigger than Cade. If anything, they're the same size. Hunter's definitely taller than Cade Cunningham is. So that was not great. I didn't think Hunter on ball was very good in this game against Cade, but they kind of let him get very comfortable in the first half. It was better in the second half, but he was getting some practice jump shots basically into the 18-foot range and just making a bunch of those in the first half. Point of attack defense was not great, generally speaking. I thought Aaron Holiday ratcheted it up. We'll get to that in the second half of this game, but generally speaking, the point of attack stuff was not the best from Atlanta. They had a terrible possession late in the first half, but Murray bailed it out with a deep contested three that was pretty lucky to go in. But then after Cade had jump shot at the buzzer, the Hawks were only up by 1 at the halftime break. I thought the Hawks were pretty well prepared to attack Detroit switching in this game. They play a lot of switching schemes. They play a lot of quick guys. Both their centers, Duren and Isaiah Stewart, can move on the perimeter. But the Hawks did a pretty good job game plan wise, I thought, of executing against that offensively. They were really good with stars on the floor, that's for sure, in the first half. They only took 10 threes in the entire half. One of those was actually a heave, so really only 9 threes in the whole half. That's not very many. Trae had 23, though, and they actually scored their season high in a half, 62 points in the first half of this game against the Pistons. Defensively, though, it was pretty rough. As I mentioned before, Cade Cunningham got whatever he wanted to get in that first half, and we'll kind of leave it there as a point of reference. But overall, not the greatest first half performance, and the third quarter was pretty rough in itself as well, but we'll come back to that in a second. We'll have full coverage of the second half as far as the game flow, my takeaways from tonight's game, as well as the individual player analysis, player by player, how they all fared in this one, and look ahead briefly to the rest of the week. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show today. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn, and these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team. They do it faster, and they do it for free. I've had to hire a few times in the last couple of years, and LinkedIn has proven to be an awesome resource. It's incredibly easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, and they have high-quality candidates that you need to locate and finally make your possible and best possible hire. Then, once you're set up, add a job and your purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word they're actually hiring. And LinkedIn Jobs also has simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience that you can quickly hire and prioritize if you want to interview them and then eventually add them to your team. You want to finish the year strong, and finding the right team member is a key piece of doing just that. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires against leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and they help you to do it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, and the third quarter was pretty rough for most of it. Now, late in the third, it got better, but it was pretty sluggish on both sides, actually. At the outset of the third quarter, both teams failing to score in bunches at the outset of the third. Okongwu came in earlier than usual, and I kind of said this in the moment on Twitter and other places. I was wondering aloud whether they would put Capela back in quickly to kind of stagger those guys again as a reference before the break and kind of have him against Jalen Duren, because Duren was really out physicaling and just outsizing and out just toolsing Okongwu in that first half. That was what the Hawks ended up doing. They also had like to pair Capela and Trae together, which again worked in this one. That happened about 7 minutes into the game. They brought Capela back into the game literally as soon as Duren checked in. Like Duren went to the table, and Nate turned and shoved Capela into the game at the same time. So that was a adjustment that I agreed with and kind of saw coming a mile away. And spoiler alert, Capela was awesome in the second half of this game. Hunter got his fourth foul with like 5.5 minutes to go in the third, had to come out. He didn't play a ton the rest of the way because of foul trouble, ended up fouling out anyway at the end of the game. But the offense was really, really bad for large portions of the third quarter. In fact, they had 9 points in more than 7 minutes at the outset of the second half. They were 4-13 from the floor and 4 turnovers. They only had 1 free throw attempt that they actually missed. They didn't score for almost 4 full minutes. at one point, and the Pistons took an 8-point lead. And there was some panic that was happening on Twitter that I was seeing in real time. It was 79-71. There was one nice pick and roll from Murray to Okongwu out of a timeout. That was a badly needed bucket from the Hawks. But when Capela came back in, things kind of ratcheted up. I'm not saying that was the only reason why, but both times that Capela came into the game, once in the third quarter and then once again in the fourth, the Hawks immediately got a lot better. This is not me picking on Okongwu, but it was just kind of the case. It's very obvious on the scoreboard as well. But the Hawks went on a 13-3 run, basically aided as soon as Capela came back in the game. He had a big dunk on the pass by Trae, another one where Pistons had to foul him to stop an easy bucket, and then Capela had a huge block on Cade Cunningham. Also, as part of that 13-3 run, Jalen Johnson had a great possession, actually went one-on-one in the post for an easy bucket using his size. That's what you want to see from Jalen Johnson, who's a different player. He's not this pure spot-up guy, but that was a nice, mature, under-control finish from Johnson. I also thought Aaron Holiday was very good in the second half of this game. I've said before, I think he is the guy that I would circle to maybe have AJ Griffin's minutes be in front of. But in this game, they needed Aaron Holiday. He was actually quite good and was one of the reasons of the second half the Hawks won this game. He seemed to at least kind of bother Cade Cunningham at the point of attack. He's obviously a lot smaller than Hunter, but he was at least kind of just up in Cade Cunningham, making him uncomfortable. And offensively, he had a couple nice plays in the second half. But the Hawks got it back to a tie game at the end of the third after being down by 8. That was actually a nice closing kick to even things out there. Neither team was able to keep their offensive pace in the first half, but Trae had 31 through 3 quarters. He was really good before he left the game at the end of the third quarter. As usual, it was Murray plus bench to open the fourth, and this time around it went better. I think largely because of Aaron Holiday. Aaron set up a Jalen Johnson corner 3 that was a great pass over the top of the defense, and and also made one of his own. A bunch of winning plays from him on both ends of the floor. Aaron Holiday, it was good to see from him. Back and forth, though, for most of the first half of the fourth quarter, like the first 6 minutes or so, it was like Hawks up 2, Hawks down 2, Hawks up 1, Hawks down 1, back and forth, back and forth. I thought Murray struggled kind of mightily with his handle in the fourth quarter, weirdly speaking. A couple possessions where he just could not get a hold of the ball, kind of kicked it around a little bit, and then actually had a turnover that led directly to a Detroit dunk with about 6 minutes to go as the starters came back into the game. But again, as I mentioned a second ago, as soon as Capela came back in, the results were much better for Atlanta. He had a huge block that led to a Collins run out for a dunk, and then a 9-0 run, generally speaking, from the Hawks to go from down 1 to up 8 after Capela got a putback, etc. And the Hawks never trailed again. Now, it was definitely not over at that point, but that was their biggest sort of extensive run in the fourth quarter, that 9-0. They gave up a 3, though, to Bogdanovich, who seemed to make a big shot every time Detroit needed him to the entire time. But then even after that stoppage, Capela got 2 offensive rebounds, knocking the ball out to Hunter, who got fouled. He didn't only made 1 or 2 free throws, but that was actually a good possession to sort of extend the game a little bit. Again, Bogdanovich kept making big shots. The Hawks were only up by 3 again with about 2 minutes to go because they botched a switch between, it looked like, Collins and Murray on Bogdanovich for a 3. And then Collins had a bad turnover, but in the play of the game, according to Nate McMillan, I think I probably agree with this, Collins, after that turnover, up 3, chases down Cade Cunningham from like 80 feet. Just full sprint. Collins is a great, end-to-end athlete. Vertical, goes up, blocks it. That ends up with the Hawks scoring on the end of the floor with Murray kind of pushing off probably against Bogdanovich, not getting called. And it goes from what could have been a 1-point game to a 5-point game with a minute and a half to go. Huge play by Collins, and obviously it was his turnover that sort of set that off. But it was a great recovery, a good sort of will to win kind of play from John Collins. And then there was one more nightmare coming though. Hawks up 5 out of a timeout with 1:32 to go. What you can't do there is allow a 4-point play, and they did. Hunter made a very poor play, actually, fouling Bogdanovich on 3-point attempt. He made it. It was a bad mistake. He also fouled out on the play. That made it even worse. He was the one guy, like Bogdanovich was the kind of only guy that the Hawks couldn't afford to lose in that spot, and they did it for the second time, like 90 seconds. Just a rough one there. But then Trae, it's a huge weapon, as I've said before in previous seasons, but in case you're a new listener to the podcast, it is a huge weapon to have your best player be an elite ball handler in Trae Young, and also be an elite free throw shooter. And the Hawks were able to lean on that down the stretch. Trae drew a foul with 1:13 to go, got to the line, made both. Collins got called for a foul that was pretty soft, I thought, against Sadiq Bey, but it was a ball line situation. Bey missed both free throws. That was a huge swing for Atlanta. And then after a broken play, the Hawks scored again to go up 5, and the Capela denies Cade at the rim to keep that margin at 5. It was still not safe just yet because Bogdanovich had another 3 to get it to 3. But again, they get a good setup out of a timeout, get the ball to Trae, up 3. He makes both to go up by 5, and that's your ball game. So it was tight down the stretch. The Hawks were leading after that 9-0 run. They led the rest of the way, but it was within 3 a couple different times with Detroit having the ball. And the Hawks just made just enough plays down the stretch. As far as takeaways are concerned from this game, I think offensively, it was not the best performance from Atlanta, nor was it the worst. I thought, especially in the first quarter, the Hawks were really good. But if you were to take that out, which you can't do, but if you were to take that out, the Hawks were not great offensively the rest of the game. But they did shoot 50% from the floor and 8 of 22 from three. And that's actually their best three-point percentage of the season, but it's a very, very small volume. I'm not going to do this every single podcast, but they took 22 threes and it took 42 shots from two-point range outside the paint. That's not a good split. Even for a Hawks team that's going to take more mid-rangers than most teams do because they have good shooters from there, your Traes, your Murrays, your Hunters, etc. That was not the greatest split. They did make more, though, in this game. 12 turnovers is totally fine. That's about top 3 or 5 in the league kind of number per game. Only 1 for Trae Young. That's a huge thing for him. They got a lot of offensive rebounds on the stretch, a 30% offensive rebound rate for the game. That's really encouraging. 56 points in the paint is a good number for Atlanta, and they had good balance with 6 guys in double figures. Trae was the obvious standout offensively as a scorer, but they had good balance otherwise. They didn't have the same transition frequency that they had in the first 3 games. Famously, as we discussed yesterday on the show with Tyler, they've gotten out on the fast break quite a bit more than usual in these first 3 games. Less so in this one, but they were much better in the half court. Their efficiency in the half court was pretty good in this game, like 85th percentile, more than a point per possession in the half court. You're never going to be as good in the half court as you are in transition. That's obviously just the way basketball goes. But they were much better in that setting in this game, which ended up being very helpful along the way. Defensively, the numbers looked okay by the end. A 113 defensive rating is still pretty bad, but it was in the 130s in the first half at times. So they were much better in the second half. In fact, Detroit shot 42% from the floor after halftime, and they only had 5 offensive rebounds in the second half on 26 misses, which is about a 19% or so offensive rebound rate. That's really good. So the Hawks did a good job in the glass in the second half. They did a much better job contesting shots. Other than losing Bogdanovich, they did a better job on Cade Cunningham after halftime. They did force 14 turnovers. That's not a huge number, but that's totally fine for this Atlanta team. And the only thing that the Hawks did not do very well was hold up on three-point shooting. But credit to Detroit, they got to make the shots. But I think basically first half, pretty poor defensively. Second half, much, much better, much more like it was the first 2 games when the Hawks were playing against bad teams, yes, in Houston and Orlando, but the numbers were pretty good. And I think for the season, even if you include, again, that rough game on Sunday, the Hawks, as I speak right now, I'm looking this up live on the podcast, have a 109 defensive rating for the season. I'll tell you this right now. If the Hawks could just dial up a 109 for the season and just say, we'll take it, they should do that. It's not like the greatest number in the world. That's like more of a middle of the pack number, like a top 12, 15-ish number, but that'd be just fine for this team given their offensive talent. So anyway, that's all I have for the actual takeaways in terms of the team stuff in this game. We'll have more individual breakdowns and more in a moment, but first, a word from our sponsors on the podcast today. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. Football season continues. BetOnline is the number one source for all of the pro college football betting needs that you might have this season. Find all the latest developments, the game matchups, the news, and the podcast at BetOnline, including all the stuff that you need. The weekend slate that's upcoming, and it certainly will be busy in football over the Thursday to Sunday run, as it always is, really anytime in October and November. And BetOnline also has all the wagering information you're looking for. That includes live betting and esports and live scores. And BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to consume all the sports you have interest in. The NBA stuff is certainly at the forefront for us on this podcast. There's plenty to still wager on each and every day at BetOnline. That includes game odds and props. And then futures are still available on which teams are going to win the East and the West and the NBA title and awards. All that fun stuff is available at BetOnline. And beyond the NBA, BetOnline has odds and lines on college sports and baseball, MMA, boxing, golf, tennis, auto racing, horse racing, soccer, entertainment bets, and much more. Head to BetOnline right now on your mobile device, your computer, to learn more about all the trends and the action in the sports world. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, we'll go to the bench first, as we often do on this podcast. Again, only 9 guys played for the Hawks in this one. Notably, AJ Griffin did not. I would have probably tried him, but they didn't, and that we'll leave it there for now. The guys who did play, Jalen Johnson was the clear number 9 of 9. He played 12 minutes. I thought he was better in this game than he had been. Defensively, still some rough moments, a little bit tentative at times, but did have 5 points, 3 rebounds in 12 minutes, 2 of 4 from the floor, and 1 of 2 from 3. I thought he was just fine. He wasn't bad, nor was he great. Justin Holiday, pretty quiet game. Did have 3 assists. Did have 2 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 of 3 from the floor. He took 1 shaky shot, but I think actually, if anything, he probably could have taken more shots in this one. He is still, I would imagine, under the weather a little bit. If he was questionable on Tuesday, he probably wasn't 100% healthy to be playing this game, but he was out there and was generally just fine. Aaron Holiday, like I said before, was really good in the second half. First half, not as much. But 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, had a block, 4 away from the floor, made both of his threes. That was huge for the Hawks. A couple of great passes, some good defense against Kid Cunningham and Corey Joseph and others at the point of attack, Killian Hayes, etc. I thought Aaron was a big plus off the bench, and he was the only guy on the bench that had a plus in the net and the plus minus. He was actually +3 in his 18 minutes of play. And then Okongwu, a weird game for Okongwu. Now, on the bright side, he was 5 of 5 from the floor for 10 points and 3 rebounds. He had a steal, he had a block, a couple nice highlight plays in 21 minutes. It wasn't like he was bad. Now, I do think that he played much better against Stewart than against Duren, which just kind of makes sense. You know, Okongwu size-wise, there's this whole conversation that I'm already kind of tired of right now about Okongwu and his physical size. And I'll just say this now for people that I keep hearing this, that the Hawks are small in the front court. That's really not the case at all. Okongwu is small for a center. Yes, that is true. But if you go position by position, Hunter is at least average, if not bigger than average at the 3. Collins and Johnson is a pretty darn big and physical power forward tandem in the modern NBA, where a lot of teams are playing small ball. And then Capela isn't 7'2", but he's definitely center size and physical wise. So it's really just Okongwu that's smaller. Anyway, he struggled against Duren. He was better against Stewart. I don't think he was bad in this game, but he was -19. And I think there's a little bit of noise there always. At the same time, I think Capela, like, it was kind of night and day for me. It's not me picking on Okongwu, who I really like, but when Capela was out there, it was a different game for the Hawks in a positive direction in this particular outcome. So I'm not worried about Okongwu. I think he's been fine. He was still efficient around the rim. The finishing is definitely player versus player, Okongwu versus Capela. Okongwu was a different stratosphere as a finisher than Capela is, no question about that. But the rest of the game, I thought Capela was better in this game. So anyway, that's not to pile on Okongwu, but the -19, not necessarily indicative of just him being bad or anything like that. Of the starters, we'll actually start with Capela, kind of bring the synergy here. 6 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 4 blocks for Capela in 26 minutes. Now, I can already see this coming. If you did not watch this game and only see the box score, you will see Capela with 6 points, 10 rebounds, 3 away from the floor. And you probably think, hey, he was just okay. Capela was, I think, the biggest reason why they won this game in the second half. He was fantastic after halftime. Now, the +22, just like the Okongwu was -19, there's a little bit of noise in there. But both times he came back in the game in the second half, the Hawks made huge runs. He was all over the place defensively in the second half of this game. And the 4 blocks is obviously part of that. But rebound-wise, he was all over the place, like keeping the ball alive and taps and boxing out and sealing guys. 26 minutes is fine. I think him and Okongwu splitting like that is totally okay with me. 26-7 minutes for Capela is fine. But I thought he was really good in the second half. First half, a little bit sluggish. And I think that it's fair to say, like, he's not quite the same athlete that he used to be in Houston. That's notable, I think, is accurate at this point. But I thought he was really good in the second half. And I would encourage you, if you did not watch the game, you don't have to take my word for it. If you just put the tape on from when he came back in the game in the third quarter the rest of the way, and you'll see a guy who made a big difference in this one. Speaking of big differences, John Collins. John Collins has been really good this year. Now, on Sunday, he couldn't make a shot. He was 3 of 12 from the floor against the Hornets. Nothing was going in for Collins. I thought he was still really good in that game. As far as like his actual floor game, he just didn't make shots. The first 2 games, he was awesome. This game, awesome again. 19 points, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks, had a steal. Did have 4 turnovers, so it's probably more than you want from him. But 9 of 14 from the floor. I thought defensively, he's been really good so far. I know I've been begging the drum for probably 2-3 years now that Collins is an underrated defender. It's been very obvious to me he's been pretty good defensively in all 4 games. He was really good. Made a bunch of big plays down the stretch, including, of course, the headline play that I mentioned before, but McMillan called the player of the game with the chase down block. That was an awesome play. Hunter cooled off after the hot start. I think he had 10 points. 10 points in the first quarter. 17 for the game, fouled out in 27 minutes, but he was efficient from the floor, 7 of 10 from the floor. As I discussed with Howard Jones a little bit on Tuesday, I think Hunter has been a nice B+ so far. He's not been incredible. That was still the case here. I think defensively he had some real trouble with Cade Cunningham. That was a little bit alarming because, again, he shouldn't be getting bullied physically, which he kind of was by Cade in the first half. But I think he was okay the rest of the way, and then good and efficient offensively, so no real concerns there for me. DeJounte Murray struggled. This is his worst game as a Hawk. Now, I kind of made fun of somebody for pointing this. Someone was like, well, he's had a rough season so far. I'm like, no, that's not true at all. Coming into the night, Murray was averaging 20 points, 8 rebounds, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, a league-leading 3.5 blocks, 3.5 steals per game. He was pretty efficient, so he's been good. Tonight he wasn't. The handle was loose. In fact, I'm wondering if he had more than 2 turnovers in this game. I think maybe one of Collins got to Murray or something like that. It was a little bit weird. But even with all that, like he was 14 points on 18 shots. That's not what you want, especially when you include free throws. He was actually 14 points on 20 shooting possessions, and he was only 3 of 12 on twos. Some loose handle stuff, but he did have 8 assists, 8 rebounds. And even when he's kind of pressing, he made some nice plays in the second half that were kind of key to the Hawks making the runs that they actually had to make. So he wasn't good by his standards at all in this one, but he's allowed. I think he's been just fine so far, let's just say. And then finally, Trae Young, 35 points, a season high for Trae, 6 assists. Not like an off the charts number there, but 1 turnover is really impressive for him, plus 10. He was only actually 1 of 7 on threes. So he didn't really have a jump shot still. In fact, in the 4 games, I think Trae is like down like 20% from 3. Like it's going to get better. I don't worry about his jump shot really at all. But he was 8 of 14 on twos and 16 of 17 at the line. That's a huge weapon. It always has been for Trae, both foul drawing and then converting the foul shots at the line. He was a big reason why, but the Hawks were 20-25 from the free throw line in this game. Another huge plus there. So I don't think Trae was like his absolute best. I think he had moments when he was in this game, especially in the first 8 minutes or so was a masterclass from Trae Young. He was in total control. He wasn't quite as good after that, but still 35 points and efficiently doing what he does basically in this one, and then a huge sort of put away weapon at the end of the free throw line. So from here, the two teams have a rematch. There's these new kind of baseball style series that the NBA has included the last couple of years, in part just to kind of limit travel. The Hawks have a couple of more of these in 2023. Like there's one against Washington or one against maybe Charlotte or something like that. Miami, one of those when you get into like February and March. But this is the one that's early on. They actually just stay in Detroit. They have a practice on Thursday, and they play again against the Pistons on Friday. That one's obviously more of a neutral. Coming into this game, the Hawks had a huge rest advantage. This time around, both teams on the same footing. Detroit will be staying in their own beds, but the Hawks won't have to leave the hotel. They will be able to just kind of be there for Friday night. So, I mean, actually interesting sort of test case. I would imagine if I had to guess right now, Jaden Ivey will play for the Pistons. If he was just out with an illness in this one, he could be back by Friday. We'll see on everybody else for the Hawks. But I would imagine the Hawks will be favored in the game. The Hawks were solidly favored in this one. They didn't cover, but they still are the better team. And even on the road, the baseline projection should be a Hawks win. Now, I'm always one to say that nothing is assured in the NBA because nothing is assured in the NBA. But if you look beyond this, the Hawks have 4 more games on this road trip, and this game against Detroit, especially with no travel in between, is by far the easiest one of those 4 games. They play the Pistons on Friday. Then they have to go to Milwaukee on the back-to-back on Saturday. That's a tough ask. The Bucks are really good. Then they have to go to Toronto on Halloween, and then they go to New York to play the Knicks. Now, the Knicks are not great necessarily in my mind, but they are better than the Pistons, and that'll be the last game of a 5-game road trip. Always a tough ask. So getting this one on Friday would be very helpful for Atlanta, not only to go to 4-1, but also just because I don't think you can expect – obviously they could win the rest of these games. You can't expect to run the table on those last 3 games. So getting another win here would be nice to add to the ledger and sort of extend this positive start. The Hawks are 3-1 right now. Are they playing fantastic basketball? No, but that's maybe the underlying bright spot of having this soft schedule early in the season is that they didn't have to play their absolute best to get 3 wins in 4 games so far. And they'll have to be better than this moving forward. Like if they play like they did today against Milwaukee, they're going to lose. I'll say that right now. If they play even like they did against Houston or Orlando, they probably lose that game. So they're going to have to be better on as a whole and maybe individually in certain spots. But I think generally speaking, 3-1, you got to take that and run with it even after Sunday's frustrating performance. And we'll see how they fare on Friday. As for the podcast, I'm not 100% sure, but there may not be a show between now and Friday because there's the game on Saturday as well and a back-to-back. But we've had plenty of content in this space moving back the last couple of weeks. This is like the 8th show in 9 days, something like that. So if you missed anything from earlier in the week, those podcasts are still available to you, including Tyler Jones' visit on Tuesday. I'll have full coverage of both games on Friday and Saturday nights in back-to-back fashion, and we'll be diving in as we always do for next week and beyond. Please do me a favor, if you've not done this already, but please subscribe to the podcast. People all sometimes ask me how to support the show. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. So if you really want to support the podcast, the best thing to do is to subscribe and download the podcast across multiple platforms. That could be Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, any of those places that you like to find podcasts. Then on video, we are on YouTube for the majority of episodes as well. So subscribe there, click the follow buttons, leave 5-star ratings, share the podcast with friends, all that fun stuff. Also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. And after this victory from the Hawks on this Wednesday, we'll be back at the very latest after the game on Friday night. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.